I want to talk about undeserved influences and the kinds of trouble that it creates for people who have these influences and who have developed them over years with money or cajoling or political ties, and then entire populations believe in these influences. And then when things change and those beliefs are exposed or they don't work, then not only the people who have the influence have a big problem, also the people who believe in that all that bullshit, they have a big problem. I could I could tell you some examples. I just want to start with the stuff that's in the news right now. Is I was watching YouTube, and the first videos that I come across is that the Vice President Pence is talking to the supposed U.S. allies, telling them, hey, you shouldn't make side deals with Iran, you shouldn't bypass our sanctions, or you should walk away from a nuclear deal with Iran, and let things work out. And then at the same time, Pence and Pompeo is participating in the what I call the Losers Club in Warsaw, which is designed to again bring about coalition and attack yet another country, maybe Iran or anybody else, Venezuela, that they deem to be weak, that they could go in and do all this and that. And concurrently, Netanyahu comes out and he says that, hey, I don't like this conference to be held in Warsaw because the Poles actually were helping the Nazis in the World War II. Then the population and the government of Poland were being guests to these idiots, and then they turn around and they don't even like their own propaganda. When the hosting nation has believed in this propaganda, but they don't themselves want this, they say, oh, maybe we should have another country that is more impartial, like Germany or France. Then you just have to look at in the YouTube. Another group that are very delusional are all these U.S. pastors. I think the few of them that come to mind are these evangelical pastors that are unconditionally and unreasonably, without any restriction, they support Israel, support military actions against Iran or other countries. They themselves sponsor and go over there. And in Israel, some of these guys, they get into trouble because the real idiot Jews that hate Christians, they get into scuffles with them, and they end up in the Israeli courts. And some of them, they have been getting expelled because they're confronted with people who are very delusional about Judaism, and also they are confronted with their own lies and propaganda that they have been instituting in the United States through AIPAC. It's like this thing, support for Israel and Zionists, has become like a created monster, and is out in the world and doing all this stuff, and they're connected to all these crooked politicians, and they're doing all these things which are supposedly in favor of Israel. But the Israel that exists now has all these problems, and on top of all of that, they have all this misinformation and propaganda that they have themselves put out, and they're unable to make even concessions or make dealing that are fair and understandable. And in today's world, with either their neighbors or with Europeans or anybody, it's a huge mess. Then other examples of propaganda that just takes on a life of its own, is everywhere. People cannot really divest themselves from all this trash. I was listening to Cliff High, and he was saying that the Hollywood, for some years, many years, that been putting like subliminal messages in the films, in Disney cartoons, in stuff that kind of friendly and sympathetic to gays and pedophiles and Zionists, whoever that they kind of like. A lot of the stuff that the Hollywood puts out itself, the overtly, not subliminally, are deeply hostile to socialists, to communists, to anybody that institutes any kind of program. And it used to be that they were also very hostile to nationalist leaders in different countries, whether they were socialists or not, that didn't like American or Western banks or militaries coming in and doing this and that. And all these movies that they have been pumping out have been juicing the population. Well, all this propaganda has taken on a life of its own, and now even the other commentators come in, and you hear out of their mouth comes in this deeply hostile to socialism, deeply hostile to Muslims. One of the guys that are supposedly independent is, I would say, like Peter Schiff or Greg Hunter, or you look at the stuff they're saying, is that, for example, look at the cartoon that Greg Hunter put out, and he's one of the best commentators and almost always very impartial, and he shows one of the senators in a very derogatory way that she's so stupid, and she has a placard in her hand saying that to stop cow farts. Like his image impression of people who are not right-wingers or new cons or new liberals is that they're just totally stupid, and the stuff that they believe in, even if it smells of socialism, it will ruin the United States, ruin everything we have built up. And then they go on with all these immigration laws, our society is going through an apocalypse because there are more Latin people integrated into our society, and more might be coming in. All just stuff that the Hollywood has put on, and just pump the population full of this shit that now the people have very difficult time to think objectively about politicians, about any problems that might exist, because they have all this framework trash that the Hollywood and all these commentators have built up, and it's like you're living in a very deep fog of crap. I want to talk about some of the other stuff that Hollywood dishes out, this complete trash. And one of the examples is their deep hostility to technology, to AI, to anything that might undermine the already built up corporations. In the other videos I talked about one example is how Kodak, the corporation, fell apart because their technology was based on film, and then the digital cameras were coming in. When the digital cameras came in, they captured almost all of the market. Right now only some artists or filmmakers use film. So the film became a niche market where it was a main market. Well, it's the same story with any technology. Say, for example, fracking technology. Okay, it might be in its initial stage, but I think they're getting better. When the technology comes initially, it's a difficult and expensive technology. It might even be polluting technology that the industry needs. There is need because we need to make more oil. We need to pump more oil because our economy needs a sustainable, long-term source of revenues. Like many countries, like Russia, Saudi Arabia, or other countries, that's part of our national need. Also, it makes our country secure in monetary terms, and also in terms of energy, in case there is stuff going on in the world that we have no control on, like the Saudis suddenly collapsing the price of oil to $20 a barrel. Then that would be a huge loss of revenues for many countries, including the United States. So having a independent energy policy and independent source of revenues is very important. It's just like national security. So even though this technology, fracking, is polluting, it might be in its infancy, then it's still worth it to pursue this technology. And also very important to put money into research to make sure that it gradually becomes safer and better, and it evolves into something that we could live with. Okay. Then other technologies, I see a lot of propaganda with this, and also military action secretly by U.S. government, is that many people in Japan or Far East, when they talk about the Fukushima incident, they don't call it just a nuclear accident. They call it an attack, which means that many of these people, the Asians, are very suspicious of United States. They went into somewhere in the Pacific, close to their shores, and buried a nuke there, and then exploded the nuke. Then what happened is that there was a huge jolt to the bottom of the sea, and it raised up the water. The water drained from the coast and went into this central point, and then it came back as a tsunami and damaged their nuclear reactor, which is often built by the shores by water because it needs to get cooled. So concurrently with all these conspiracies and accusations, which could be very true, then there is all these paid scientists that come in and say that, hey, you know what, other countries, they should not use fission-based nuclear reactors. They are so this and that. They're extremely dangerous. They're not worth it, and we are encouraging you to do just that. And then there is all these reports that it's actually United States hackers that send in hacking code into Iranian centrifuges and possibly the Soviet Chernobyl reactor, and damage the reactor by modifying its code or operating code, which is written in machine language usually. That's a very sophisticated attack. You really need to machine language to know what this device is saying or doing. Okay, so the people who organized it were the Americans, or very sophisticated hackers like Israelis. On top of all of this stuff that these governments are doing secretly to damage different technologies or stop foreigners, is their overt political gestures and outright military attack, like Israel attacked the reactors for Iraq and other countries with jets flying over and throwing bombs, and economic sanctions and constant commotion in the international markets that, hey, you shouldn't do this. It's because of their deep fear, or Israel's deep fear, that if other countries have tactical nukes, they'll use it someday to nuke parts of Israel. Well, this is something that's going to happen anyhow because of all the provocations and war making these countries have been making. So the technology had nothing to do. It's only a extension of the technology after all the war making and provocations. Is the technology itself, it just makes energy. Another line of propaganda which you see in the Hollywood everywhere is deep hostility towards AI, towards the code or technology that other countries might use or companies might use to produce things cheaper, or do tasks that are complicated and ritualistic, or require long algorithms or human intervention. We shouldn't use that because it makes many of these professions like useless. For example, let's say there was a robot that researched everything legally and knew everything that a competent attorney would know, and this robot was sold. It could function in courts. Okay, so the robot could do an effective job defending criminal or defending a corporation. But what irritates many humans is that the robot came in and replaced their jobs, replaced their profession, and their vested interest was threatened. This is the same concept or idea when vested interests of banks, vested interests of military organizations, vested interests in Zionist criminals or Wahhabis, they become threatened or they become outmoded, the stuff they do, because other technologies come in and prevent this from going on. An example of this would be like what's going on just now in Yemen. The Yemenis government, after many years of warfare that they were losing and they were getting bombed or wrecked, they resorted to other technologies like rockets. They learned how to make rockets from Iran, drones. They have some that they bought from foreigners, but now they're making some themselves. They use their ground forces differently to combat something that was troubling them for many years. And now the war has turned. It's completely the Saudis are becoming like the losing side, and Yemenis are winning. So when new technologies or ideas come in, okay, they are not all evil. In the initial stages, they are very expensive. They are very troubled. They are very hard to get sometimes. But what the vested interest does is attack these technologies at their infancy and try to prevent the countries or make them fearful of using this technology, and then it will become concentrated in the hands of the U.S. corporations, and this cannot go on in our world because there are many countries that have extremely large amount of resources, either be it financially or they have a cadre of scientists that even if it's something is very expensive or troublesome or even dangerous or polluting, they are able to take it through the stages that it needs to go to become a viable technology. I could also mention cloning, how Hollywood presents cloning as just completely evil and be used in a very anti-human manner. There's some films shows that like some old fart is a senator. He gives some DNA and a company goes and makes entire human body, and then they kill this person and take her parts and give it to this stupid old senator. But that's not. This would be a very infant form of cloning technology, because you don't have to clone entire human being to be able to harvest organs, or you can make devices or reactors to make just one organ, like you just make one kidney or one leg or one finger. Okay, so this technology has already evolved beyond things that could be attacked ethically and otherwise. Also, one of the famous examples is when the banks suppressed the technology that there was a wireless transmission of electricity, and the inventor, he died poor and penniless, and had all these obstacles to promote his technology. I think his name was Tesla, and there are many technologies like that. The best thing to do is ignore these all this propaganda, and even if something is might be ethically a little difficult, the United States is not the only country in the world. It's not the only country that has scientists, has money. In fact, Iran is the second to United States in the number of engineers and technicians that we produce. Compared to our population, we have a huge number of very well learned people. We can produce anything we want. China or Russia come to mind, and also they are more advanced already in many fields. Well, military weapons is one, but Cliff High was saying that Russia is like 40 years ahead of the United States in quantum physics research. Thank you very much for being in my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and leave your comment.